Coon. Oh, hey everybody! This is the Memes of Destruction here, along with Lapis, the effeminate degenerate. Pardon my French. Oh my God! Oh my God! Hold on. All right, technical. Stop it! I swear I muted myself. All right. Hey, nobody's ever had technical difficulties on the internet before. All right. So again, I am the Memes of Destruction here, along with the effeminate degenerate, as well as the common sense guy. So we're looking to talk a little bit about healthcare and maybe see if we can find a little bit of common ground among us here. So we have three different individuals from three different nations with three different systems, and we're just looking to see if we can't find better paths forward. So starting with Lapis, I believe you're located in Canada?
Yeah. So the Canadian healthcare system is, very, very what we might say provincialized, kind of the opposite of having a strong federal government program. It's divided by all the different provinces and territories. They each have their own way of running the healthcare system, but the funds come from the federal government primarily. The Canadian healthcare system is, I think, in many aspects superior to the American one because, yes, coverage is universal in Canada. There is no person that goes without coverage in Canada if they seek it. Whether they are documented, whether they're a visitor, whether they're a refugee, they can still seek healthcare. However, the Canadian healthcare system does have flaws that have often been pointed out by, American pundits. And the biggest one is the longer wait times. So I'll just share this article from CBC, which is for all those British people watching, the Canadian equivalent to the BBC. So let's just scroll up here. Wait longer than the international average. About actually, it's about 20% longer, since the international average is about 57, and it's much lower. You can see the rate that Canadians can get to see their family doctors quickly. It takes about 10 days to see your family doctor in Canada, and it's quite difficult waiting. So 1 out of 5, have to wait, more than 7 days, and sometimes. And another problem with our healthcare system is actually that it isn't public enough. It doesn't cover the cost of drugs, and doesn't cover the cost of dental care. And this results in a lot of people not being able to access these services. However, one thing that Canadians do seem to enjoy about their healthcare system is that Canadians really think that the quality of care in Canada is pretty good, and it's rated extremely highly. It's rated much higher than the 11-country average of 65. So in all, Canada is suffering from a few problems in its healthcare system, the foremost of which is the wait times, which I believe can be fixed if more nurses, more doctors, and were provided to our healthcare system, which has kind of suffered from the overall trend in recent years towards small budgets, limited government spending, and budget cuts. On the other hand, it could also use an expansion in the services it provides, especially towards covering the cost of dental care and drugs, because this actually could help people, become less, more well, and thus reduce the cost. If, let's say, you have a person who has an illness and they need this certain drug, but because of the cost of the drug, they can't, thus they can't actually access that care, and then they get sicker and sicker and sicker, and then they become an extremely serious problem, which hundreds of thousands of dollars have to be spent on in order to save, which could have been prevented had the initial investment been made of just covering the simple drug that they needed. So anyway, those are my thoughts on the Canadian healthcare system.
Oh, thank you so much, Lapis. It's very interesting. You definitely brought up like some of the higher points and some of the areas that need concern. So CSG is our fellow from over in the United Kingdom right now. So CSG, tell us a little bit about yourself and what's going on in the UK with healthcare.
Oh, okay. Hopefully most people that are on Memes' channel should know who I am or should have an idea who I am. But for people that do not, that are meeting me for the first time, my name's Jason. I actually am disabled. I have been disabled now for about 3 years. I have a lower L5 disc protrusion that ails me to stop me from walking very well. My balance is always off, always in pain quite a bit. I also have been diagnosed with fibromyalgia as well, which does not help with the pain symptoms. So I used our healthcare quite a bit. I'm not going to suggest that I'm an expert by any sense of the imagination. I'm sure none of us here would either, which is not a problem. But the thing is with most public healthcare systems, including the British one, is the fact that the waiting times are normally very high. For instance, for me to go and see my actual doctor, if I can't get onto him early enough or onto them early enough in the morning to phone up every morning, I will not get an appointment. The appointment will either be 2 to 3 weeks' time, and that's if they can pencil me in, and that's only if it's an emergency. You have to phone up and actually try and get an allocated appointment for the actual day. That's with our local GPs. When it comes to actual hospitals themselves, hospital waiting times can go from anything from 2 hours to 6 hours, depending on what it is and how busy A&E actually is, accident and emergency, or ER for the Americans. So with itself, the thing is with our NHS is that it's a good system. It works to an extent. The actual people that run it, there's too many bureaucrats in it. There's too many monkeys and not enough organ grinders, so to speak. There's too many people telling the cogs what to do. And money gets wasted that way, unfortunately, especially when you can be buying mouthwash off of a private company called Boots that would normally sell it for about $3.99 to $5.99 to potential customers like me and yourselves. But when the NHS comes along to try and buy it so that they can actually put it into the stock so they can use it themselves in hospitals, it goes out for about 50, 60 quid for each bottle. These are the problems that our NHS faces, which is the case that it always overpays everything, always makes sure that everything's overpaid. These are the problems with our NHS anyway. The good things about our NHS is that so many people that are in the profession do care about what they do. Doesn't matter where the doctors come from, doesn't matter where the nurses come from, all of them really do seem to care a lot about the patients. The patient's care is absolutely second to none. I can't fault any nurses that I've ever spoken to. I can't fault any doctors that I've ever spoken to. Yes, you get your doctors that are sometimes offhand and a little bit sharpish, but they work fucking long hours. You can expect that every now and again, especially if you go in there at 10 o'clock at night because you pulled a fucking nail off of your finger, which has happened, not to me, but I have been sat next to a guy where I've been waiting for an appointment, and yeah, that's actually happened. The thing is with most public healthcares is that they deal a hell of a lot with the purpose of people that are drunk and people that are heavily intoxicated in any sort of form of drug use or alcohol use that you want to call. And the thing is with that is that it takes up time, it takes up resources, and unfortunately it increases the amount of waiting time for everybody else. Now, it doesn't mean that these people shouldn't be treated. It just means that there are circumstances in our country that unfortunately impact the NHS a very high amount. And with that impact, it impacts the NHS at such a high account that it really does actually lose money and lose the actual effectiveness of the NHS. As you were saying as well, Lapis, with our we call it a prescription. When you get a prescription, you generally have to pay a fee of, I think it's £7.80 or £7.20. Don't quote me on that because I haven't paid one for a while because of being disabled. I'm on a certain amount of benefits for that, so that means I don't have to pay for a prescription. But for general people, that means if you were prescribed, say for instance, paracetamol, or if you wanted to call ibuprofen, for instance, instead of paying the 69 pence or £1 for the paracetamol or the £5 for ibuprofen or whatever it is, you'd have to, the country, the taxpayers, would have to pay £7.80 to the chemist every time that somebody uses that to get that prescription. So it depends on your circumstances, obviously, but generally most people would normally pay for the paracetamol themselves. Those are just some of the processes that we have in the NHS that need to be corrected, but overall it's a system that works. It's just bureaucrats that have messed it up.
Well, thank you so much, CSG, and I do tend to have a lot of agreement. It's just, well, people do seem to ruin everything at times. But yeah, so I am the memes of destruction over here. So I live in the United States of America. And yeah, as we know, we have Obamacare, aka the Affordable Care Act, which came out several years ago under President Obama. And again, even the president at the time, he said it was a step forward. To quote Vice President at that time, Joe Biden, it's a big fucking deal. And yeah, no, it is a step towards more of a either government run, assisted, some form of healthcare for all in a way. And I mean, yeah, that could definitely be a positive thing. I mean, Bernie Sanders did campaign heavily on that. A lot of folks would say, well, you're not doing it right. A lot of my thoughts as far as actually trying to move forward with stuff like this is just identify things. And again, you're starting to quantify people. And when you, anytime somebody gets quantified, people don't like that. Whereas, yes, we do need to quantify it in some way because we do have a certain level of resource scarcity, certain available folks that actually can provide care depending on the area and the situations and the availability. However, I think we can do better in this modern age because we have the internet. We're able to now communicate from 3 different countries all across the world at the same time, within real time, several hundred milliseconds. But you know what? That's pretty darn good than sending a letter and having it take 3 months to get somewhere. So I think a lot of technology that we can leverage right here, because as CSG has said, again, I'm not in the healthcare industry, but I have seen instances when I have gone to the hospital to either for something myself, when I got hit in the face at a concert, I had to go get a bunch of stitches. It was, well, it's in the middle of the corn, you're in the mosh pit, you take an elbow to the eye. I'm like, I wanted to finish the song. And the event staff pulls you over like, dude, you're bleeding too much. You got to go to the medical tent. So I'm like, fine, I don't want to bleed on everybody. So you go there, they take you out. You end up going there to the doctor at 2 o'clock in the morning. If it's an emergency, they will see you. You may have to wait for a while. However, if somebody goes in there and they don't happen to have health insurance, or they don't happen to have a lot of resources available at that particular moment in time, they can go into a lot of debt. And the sheer fact that it's like that can ruin somebody, that seems to be an issue, especially if something happened from an accident. And that's something I think a country that's as wealthy, that is as great as America, to be able to say, well, throw our hands up in the air, there's nothing we can do. I mean, even President Trump said he doesn't want people dying in the streets. I mean, how do you disagree with that? I remember watching, as Lapis said, you start watching like an old Sargon video. I'm sorry if I'm talking about a little stuff off air, or maybe from another conversation you had. I think I was watching one of your streams before this. But basically, he even like did like the 3-hour thing with, I forget who it was, but they were going over Donald Trump's 3 speeches. They were kind of taking the piss out of the dude. It's like, well, yes, that seems blatantly simple. Who's going to disagree with that? And now we've gotten to the vitriolic point where it's like, even if it seems like if the dude is to say, part of my team that I've assigned a lot of this might do, we found the cure to cancer. It's like, you're going to take away all those doctors' jobs. How did? It's like, I know that's not going to happen in that exact respect, but the sheer fact is folks don't like each other anymore. We seem to have too much hate in this world. And that's kind of why I'd suggested a few weeks ago that we kind of tried to do a series where We can have folks with different perspectives, different locations, different life backgrounds and experiences, and just see if we can kind of come together and find just a couple of common points here. So hopefully we can do this over the stream. And this has been one of the longest intros ever, but I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's certainly interesting, the situation in America. Although I have to say, like it seems a bit baffling to me, just the idea of that people shouldn't get access to healthcare, that people shouldn't have healthcare at all, like if they can't afford it or something. To me, that's just, it's a baffling concept. It's very, and like, it's completely outside of the political spectrum in Canada. Like our Conservative Party, if they ran on it, they would get maybe 10% of the vote.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would actually have to agree with that. If our Conservatives or if anybody decided that they were going to come up and say, "Oh, we're going to abolish the NHS," that they wouldn't get too many votes, not at all. But at the same time, I mean, I know we're trying to be looking for common ground, but I do like the idea of people being able to gain access to healthcare. I tell you what my actual idea for healthcare actually is. I believe that there should be a two-tier system where we should have a public system, as in a state-run and controlled system, as in hospitals, doctors, and so on and so forth. I also believe that we should have a private sector and system where we should have doctors, hospitals, and so forth. That way that the two can compete with each other. That way that there is never a monopoly on the government having it, and so on for insurance companies. They can never have a monopoly where they increase the prices so high for insurance. And so the same thing for the government, where they're giving you shitty waiting times and everything else like that. They have to compete with each other.
I think over here they call that the public option, CSG.
Sorry, what?
Oh, they call it the public option here, basically having like a government option of some healthcare that folks can afford to kind of.
I think that's the best way of running it. I honestly think that's the best way of running any sort of healthcare system, because a lot of capitalists and a lot of liberalists or libertarians or whatever.
I'm sorry, I still can't get
CSG, you just ruined the stream. Anybody that was tuning in, they just heard liberalists and they just cringed.
We're out.
Not all liberalists, not all. Hashtag not all.
Hashtag not all.
No, that's fine. But all capitalists and all libertarianism and whatever, they generally go, "Oh, well, the doctors and nurses need payment." Well, okay, well, with the public sector and with the public section that goes on for doctors and nurses and things like that, it's a case of they get paid by the state because they're actually getting paid via taxes. This is the same if you were trying to produce a insurance base for the public sector. It's the same thing. They still get paid. So if you were to implement a two-tier system that was competing with each other, it means that both people that are not rich, so to speak, or middle class, have a section where they can go to the hospital and can actually get healthcare that's affordable for them, that is paid by taxes, so to speak, which you could opt into. And if you do have somebody that wants private healthcare that can go to the front of waiting queues and everything else like that, then you have that option as well. The thing is with people that are so dogmatic in their ideology of political stances will go, well, no, that doesn't work, and no, this shouldn't work, and no, they can't work together. Why can't a system like that work together? Because you have both systems in practice. If you want to go private, you can go private. If you want the government to help you, you've got the government that can help you. Both systems would work perfectly together.
Well, how does the actual NHS currently in the UK in its current iteration, like how does that actually function? Because like I've heard some interesting things where if you were to get your private healthcare, you could take any type of the money that you paid into that and contribute it towards it. Like I forget whether it was Cabby, yourself, or someone else. They explained it. I'm like, that seems like something that makes sense. So I'm just curious if you could kind of fill us in on like what your experience has been.
Well, my experience has always been to the point of using the government side of things as using state assets, so to speak. I've never been somebody that's a rich person, but we do have the aspect of a BUPA or private hospitals where you can pay a small premium to health insurances and so on and so forth, or you could just pay the price outright. But those type of hospitals are so few in between that most people will not even go near them. To the point where the area where I am in Lincolnshire, they actually have a couple of private hospitals that are dotted around, because our hospital and hospitals are quite basic in their delivery and how they are run. So they don't have any specializations. And by that, I mean, if you wanted to have a gastric band surgery, for instance, or if you wanted something specifically done with your stomach, you would have to go to Nottingham, which is around about 50, 60 miles away.
So you'd have to travel a distance to see a specialist.
Yes, yes. But you can see specialists in certain small hospitals. And I think that's where that's where the benefits are for our sort of section of private hospitals. But the thing is, not many people know about it, and not many people have got the money to be able to do that either. But the option should be there at a greater number, in my opinion.
Well, that sounds like it would save a lot of travel time, because it sounds like a lot of this, and you even see it out here in the States as well. A lot of times, if you have something that really needs like some immediate attention to find an area, like over here, I'd have to go down to like usually Boston or something, because you're going to find a higher concentration of medical professionals, because there's also a higher population. But for me, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, it's not the largest of states. So that's usually not the biggest deal. For me, you're talking maybe like a 35 or so minute drive, sometimes 3.5 hours, depending on traffic. But here's the thing. If you're in Texas and you're on the west side of Texas and you got to travel to like more the east side, that's hundreds and hundreds of miles. Like, I understand, like, that's a different thing. And then you're talking about like the transport issue and everything like that. So it adds additional expenses, additional time you might have to take off from work and everything. So these are a lot of factors here. And I remember now, Lapis, I'm not sure, like if this is something to do, you had mentioned like the wait time in Canada or the States, I forget which one, you saw a 20% difference. But that is something that, all right, it is a different system. Is it worth it? Can you still receive immediate medical care? Like if your leg gets torn off or something, it's like, these are the different factors that, yeah, we'll have disagreements on what is most important at the time, but that usually ends up coming down to an individual situation. I'm just trying to find ways, maybe utilizing technology and whatnot, that we can, like, I don't know, better triage some of these folks and whatnot.
Yeah, definitely. I think that in a publicly funded healthcare system, which I am an advocate of, that it would be extremely important for people, everyone, to have the ability, everyone who has access to the internet, which I think should be everyone, healthcare information and get consultation with doctors online. This is actually, interestingly enough, this is one area where the United States is better than Canada. And this is some information I found on StatsCan, just kind of statistics from, this part of the world. Just kind of these are the 11 sampled countries. And it turns out that Americans have better access to health information, laboratory results, etc., and medical questions with healthcare professionals than Canada. So what I think the Canadian healthcare system could really invest some money in is making it easier to have online access to this information and online contact with your professionals. Because another problem with the Canadian healthcare system is that the wait times may not necessarily be something that can be fixed. And by I mean this is that Canada is a very, very large country. And so it takes a very long time to transport medical supplies from one hospital to the next, to the next, to the next, and to transport people from the next to the next to the next. And a lot of these, a lot of people live in rural areas, and it's not easy to give all of them care. And, it can be done, but it may mean that it will take a bit of time, right? And so I think that having online information available to them and, like drugs that could be like shipped for free from like a government-run website or something would be something that would be very helpful for these rural communities.
It's very interesting that you bring that up. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that it's very interesting. I think that's a great idea. I mean, obviously, Canada and America are a lot bigger and spacious than what the UK is, obviously. But we still suffer from systems like that as well, where the fact is that our villages, so to speak, are not getting the same amount of attention as our cities are. Obviously, most governments are always going to favour the cities, the same as and capitalists as well are going to favour the cities rather than the villages, because that's where the most people are. For governments, it's about getting the most votes. That's exactly where I was about to say. For most governments, it's about votes, and for most capitalists, it's about where the most money is. But that's why I was going to go on a common ground. I'm not going to try and tread on anybody's toes.
I wasn't fine. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's not a problem. I was going to say, with what you just said, is absolutely a perfect idea, because we have something called a mobile library. We also have something called a mobile manograms that come around to certain parts of hospitals and things like that to help people, obviously, test for a certain amount of cancer. We also have those type of things that come around to all of our villages. In some places, we always have a chemist, but at that moment, it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody has access to the chemist. Especially if you live in a very small village, then you don't have access to a chemist, which means, exactly as you just said, you would either catch a bus, or you'd have to catch a train, or you'd have to catch a car to be able to get to where you need to go to actually get your medicine before even paying for it. So, yeah, no, I think that would actually be a really good idea for every country to try and actually adopt.
See, I in my mind, I just have, like, you know, those things that they have in supermarkets where they send all the cash and everything up for their drawers. I'm just imagining Futurama, and I'm just like, why can't we have like the Hyperloop or something like that to transport maybe not necessarily people for safety reasons, but at least like physical non-living objects, like medicals? Because I work with a guy, he used to deliver blood for the Red Cross and stuff like that, and he told me, he's like, dude, you'd be on some late night things. He's like, you'd be out there, you see a couple of doctors, they come around, one doctor's lighting up a cigarette, they're arguing with the other one, they're like, hey, it's not brain surgery, and he's like, I'm pretty sure they were talking about brain surgery. that has nothing relevant to do. That was just a little dig at humanity. I apologize to the medical community for digging on them, but well, here's the thing. It's like, yes, like Lapis brings up like the whole, why can't you do it online in this day and age? Because I'll be straight up, when I was on RomniCare before, like when I first had to fill that out, it was like 40-something pages of different documents that you either had to like fax in, or like, it was not easy. You had to do it all physically by paper and everything. And I hate paperwork. I'm sorry. I am terrible at paperwork.
Yeah,
I understand. No, I understand it needs to be done, but it's like, it's 2018, guys. Like, can't we just, and I understand the Affordable Care Act tried to do that, and we got a really expensive website that crashed and everything, but eventually did work. It did work. I haven't done it myself. I did the state website, which eventually did work and everything, but I think it could have been better and everything. And here's where I think that the fusion between private industry and some form of like healthcare assistance at least could go through, and at least in the form of the United States. Here's one of the big things that I had problem with President Obama with the Affordable Care Act. He kept pitching, it's like, oh, it's like 95% like RomniCare. And he's just like throwing that in Mitt Romney's face at the time. And I'm like, yeah, the system wasn't perfect. But the thing is, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, with its land area and 6 million people, is different than Alabama. It's different than Texas. It's different than California. Each of these states, I mean, I remember at one point during the discussion, we were bringing up things like co-ops and different ideas. And some folks were starting to get excited, and then it just felt like it got rammed through. So I feel like President Obama wanted to do what he thought was right, and you understand where the guy's coming from. He lost his mom to cancer, so like that's going to affect you and everything because you're getting. Yeah, go ahead.
You're saying like the American people didn't feel listened to when it came to what Obama did?
I think folks are typically smart. Like, they know what they know, often well, but when confronted with something that they're not that familiar about, we don't want to feel stupid, so we end up saying what other smart folks are saying, or folks that we tend to trust. And then we're not perfect creatures, so then we kind of take some quick sound bites and we may reinvent them a little bit, and that's where we have a lot of these disagreements, and they exacerbate more and more.
It kind of sounds like the opposite of the sentiment that was behind Brexit. I mean, sorry to like comment on someone else's, on the UK's politics, but like the kind of impulse there was like, no, we're tired of these experts telling us what to do and think, and we just want to take back control.
Without going into all of Brexit too much, it wasn't a case of us going against the idea of people and experts telling us what to do. It was more of a case of most people wanting to have their sovereignty back from a faceless supposed democracy, even though the people in the EU are not elected, at least by
they're mostly
everybody.
bureaucrats, right?
Yes. Yeah, and they're not experts either. They're not experts either.
Well, that's one of the things, because it sounds to me, when I had certain folks that are a bit more pro-EU explain it, it kind of made sense, because you have more of like a guild-like representation, but compared to a lot of the forms of government that we're used to, whether it be a parliamentary or a congressional-based system, it's like, it just seems to be like Greek to us, and like we don't really understand it. So like a lot of that stuff where it's something we're not used to, yeah, those folks are typically going to act in a self-interest. But going back to the whole Brexit thing, it's like CSG was saying.
I can't let you just put that there and not comment back on that, my friend.
I know. I tried to pivot.
But no, I understand your point. If it was actually democratic, I don't think most people would have an actual problem with it. The purpose of it being democratic is that the fact is that you actually have a chance of influencing what happens and what's being decided. Now, if you have 28 people and you only have one vote on those on that idea in one section, that means you only have one vote. Now, yes, that's fine if you have tons of people that are living in your country that can tell you what's going on in your country. But if you have somebody from Spain that's only looking out for Spain, and somebody says a deal that's going to only benefit Spain, and then it completely and utterly defrauds your deals, then they're going to agree with Spain, which means you can't oppose them. That's not democratic.
Yeah,
that sounds like electing the Pirate King. Who do I vote for? Me.
Yeah.
No, and there are problems. I think it comes to, sorry, Lapis, but basically just, I think everyone loves to buy, but nobody likes to be sold.
Yeah. With the EU, I think I like the idea of it more than I like the execution of it, because I like the idea of a powerful, united Europe that can, be a force for democracy and peace in the world, as opposed to, the kind of warring nations that Europe was before, always squabbling with each other and fighting with each other and, colonizing different parts of the globe. I do like that idea. I like the idea of that kind of better united world. I think the EU was not really providing that very well, and I think the British people were right to be frustrated with them. If I had to say what I would have done personally, and it doesn't really mean much because I'm just like someone from Canada, personally I would have voted to stay in the EU. But I think now that they voted to leave, you do have an obligation to execute that. You have an obligation to your people to respect their wishes. However, the execution of Brexit seems to be, I mean, this is getting completely off topic, but like somewhat very, very bad.
Yeah, because it's implemented by, unfortunately, most of our Brexit is actually done by civil servants. There's a gentleman called James Greening or somebody Greening, and he's the leader of the civil services, basically. He's the one that's actually coming up with policies for Theresa May to actually come forward with it. And with the civil service, they're not elected. They are there to advise the government.
Once again.
Yes. Yeah, no, absolutely correct.
As long as it's transparent. As long as it's transparent and people are open about it. Well, that seems to be a problem.
Yeah, it's not transparent.
I think that sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I think if people were voting for greater democratic control of their destiny as a nation, then that upon which they're exiting from that body should be executed as democratically and as transparently as possible.
Agreed.
Otherwise,
I completely agree with that. I mean, I actually agree with your statement before, where up to around about 1993, 94, I think most people were actually quite happy with the EU. The thing is with the EU at that point, it was just a trading bloc. With the added actions of having the United Nations and having the form of a council membership. So you'd be able to talk about what the problems are and be able to sort things out. But after 93, 94, it turned into a complete and utter political point. And with that political point, you then had the customs union to join in. And then with the customs union, then had the point of actually losing sovereignty and actually having their courts, the highest courts in your land. And for states, that's not a bad idea. But when you have your own country and you have your own cultures that are in that country, it doesn't help anybody.
Well, I mean, as long as you're not assembling some defense forces or an army, kind of like we saw in Star Wars. I mean, as long as you don't get to that point, I mean, it should be all right as long as it's done well.
Actually did get an army.
Yes, it did.
Not that I actually am in disagreement with like a kind of a European defense force that kind of
I thought we had NATO.
And
exactly. We had NATO. We had NATO. We did not need a European army. The thing is that a lot of people always overlook, trying to choose my words carefully. The thing that people always overlook when talking about the EU is that they already have a song, as in a national anthem. They already have a flag. They already have a country. Now they have an army. They have absolutely everything they need to be called a state, to be called a nation.
Well, is there anything inherently wrong with the United States of Europe?
Yes.
Actually, like, I think for like a lot of Europeans, it's different than for people like Canadians and Americans, where we are like, Canada has provinces that are very like culturally different. Like Ontario is very culturally different from Quebec. British Columbia is very culturally different than Manitoba. But we still, even if we don't necessarily speak the same language, there's like 2 main languages and then a bunch of minor indigenous languages. It's still, you know, there's still a greater cultural unity, I suppose, and a greater economic unity than could be found in the nations of Europe, where they do have extremely, well, they were nation states. And for a lot of people who believe that threatening to have this body that is starting to subsede their nation state. Now, I'm not necessarily an advocate of nation states. Like, to me, like, I don't know. Like, it would be, I like the problem is I like the idea of organs like the United Nations, the EU, that sort of thing seems to be a bit more problematic.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is with European countries, I suppose, I mean, we're going into physiology, we're going into points of philosophy to be able to find out what the point is of nationality and nationalism, so to speak. And when I say nationalism, I don't mean nationalism as in, oh, we need a white ethno-state. I mean, I'm Hungarian or I'm Spanish or whatever. You're happy and proud of the actual nation. So a civic nationalist.
So not a national socialist.
No, definitely not a national socialist. definitely not a national socialist, and definitely not a fascist. But the actual point is that a lot of people have our history, our European history, is a lot deeper than what American and Canadian history is. We have a deeper tie to our national identity. We especially with English, Scottish, and Welsh, for instance, and obviously the Irish. We've all had our wars to be able to decide who gets what, where goes to what. There's so much history that has defined where our borders are, where our nations are, what part of the north is to the south, and how the accent and dialect is different. Those are all different aspects that are already in the nation. That's why the nation is a state by itself. If you try and put England into Germany, the cultural differences are so vast between the two that they just would not work together. The same as if you would put Germany into Spain. The differences are so different, they would not work.
But isn't the UK like 5 different countries?
Well, there's a reason England, it's called the United Kingdom and not England.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, we're always called British. The thing is, when we actually get a form to fill in and we have to put our nationality in there, we can be white Scottish, we can be white Welsh, we can be white Irish, but we cannot be white English. We have to be white British.
What?
Honest to God truth, mate. Honest to God truth. I would not lie to you on that. On every nationality form that you have to fill in, or any form by the government, or any form by when you have to put in your nationality, you do not get a choice to put in white English. It's white British.
Why does it have to be just color based or stuff like that?
No. It's the same. It's the same.
I don't know. I'm confused.
They also have black English, also black British and black Welsh and all that sort of stuff, or Asian or whatever. They have all of that, but what I'm saying is they do not have English. It gets changed from English to British. Every other country in the United Kingdom gets their own song.
So I'm taking it this is like somewhat of a grievance. Like you think that English culture is kind of being shafted a bit. It could just be like in my perspective, at least, I kind of want to go back to what you were saying earlier about Canada and America not having as much of a sense of history. I mean, that's true for like, the people who came, the recent colonists of the last, or, people who were descended from slaves of the last 400 years or so. But for the actual Indigenous people of Canada and America, they do have that deep connection to the history, to the land, and so on, so forth. Yeah. As for the English thing, I think that could just be as a result of it kind of used to be the other way, in that England was always trying to impose its culture upon Ireland, upon the Highlands, upon what have you. So English, in all the kind of struggle to end that sort of thing, it just wasn't really no one was really paying attention to England. And so now, I suppose, if you could, I suppose, lobby your government to add English as a potential possibility.
Well, see, I'm not that bothered about putting the English in there. Oh. The thing is, it's a case of in the 90s, sorry, the song just popped into my hand. But they had white English as part of nationality and everything for putting in the films, and into the forms, and then it changed in 2000s. For me, it's just a case of why change it? I mean, I'm not bothered about it. I'm quite happy being white British. That's what I am. I mean, I'm English. I mean, Memes has seen me. I have about 3 England tattoos on me. Because I'm proud of my country. I always have been. I've always been a bit of a football lad as well, but I've always been proud of my country. It's just the way that I am. I'm always honest. I'm not going to hide anything from anybody. Most people have seen all my tattoos anyway. But I'm proud of being English. But that doesn't mean that I necessarily want it on the form just to be able to say, oh, I'm white English. It's just I find it interesting and strange that it had been taken off of forms, especially when it comes to health forms and things like that. Trying to swing it back to healthcare again.
Yeah.
Well, to derail it from healthcare, I remember back in the 3rd grade, I was getting dismissed early, and they had the new winter schedules for December, and Christmas vacation was changed to winter vacation. I'm like, why'd you get rid of Christmas? It kind of made me a little sad. I'm like, I understand it. Why don't you just call it holiday vacation or something like that? Everybody likes holidays. I don't know. It kind of bothered me a little bit.
I suppose holidays is a case of you've got Yule as well as Christmas, so it only encompasses
also Hanukkah, depending on where it falls, and I haven't celebrated for a while. I'm a terrible
depending on where it falls.
Yeah, exactly, on when it falls. Yeah. But that's what I was trying to get at. It's the idea of civic nationalism doesn't necessarily mean nationalism, and it's a case of just because that you're proud of your country doesn't mean that you're not proud of the people that are already in it. See, I've got loads of people of colour that are friends. I absolutely love all of my friends. I wouldn't change them for the world. But when I say to people that I've got England tattoos on me, straight away I'm called a racist, or straight away I'm a nationalist. I've actually lost a council working job because somebody looked at my tattoos and went, "Oh, you're an NF or National Front member," or to people from outside of the country, similar to an EDL faction. I've never joined any of those. Never joined any of those bloody groups. I've never even had thoughts that are similar. But as soon as somebody gets that idea in their head and it gets mentioned to somebody else, they look at circumstantial evidence and straight away, that's it, you're done.
So you were labeled something you weren't because of ink on your skin. Sorry, Levis.
Okay, no, it's fine. It's I suppose interesting. I think like it's unfortunately become a lot of things have become something of a casualty in the culture war, to use kind of Sargonite terms here. In regards to like things like you know, people who have Pepe avatars, they may have originally adopted them as as kind of a joke, and you know, because it was just kind of a popular internet meme, and then it only became associated with white nationalism later, and unfortunately, they kind of became lumped in with the crowd.
Well, I mean, it's hard to tell. I mean, we're pattern-based creatures. We recognize certain things. And I really don't think just because the ink on somebody's skin says one thing, then you take a couple extra guesses and are ascribing certain motives to somebody you don't really know. I mean, that doesn't really seem cool. I mean, just because even if somebody did believe something, as long as they're not espousing like extreme hatred and like promoting violence and trying to incite things, it's like, I think people should be able to believe what they believe. It's what's in another person's head nor heart, as long as they're not actually taking action to spite other individuals and cause them true harm. I mean, I don't really think there's a problem there. It's kind of like that meme of like, you see the picture of this dude all tatted up and everything, and then all of a sudden the next picture next to him, he's wearing a lab coat. It's like, yeah, this is the dude that might save your life. It's like, are you really going to care what ink he has on his arms when he's actually performing life-saving surgery?
Yeah.
It's not going to matter.
Well, there's always, you know, people always make superficial judgments, and unfortunately that's a problem. You know, personally, nationalism, even civic nationalism, which I don't see as necessarily evil or bad, like I would ethno-nationalism, it's not really my scene. Like, here's my thing with civic nationalism. Like, I like living in Canada. I like a lot of the things. It's, you know, it's multiculturalism. It's, you know, to some extent, it's religious tolerance. But there's also things I don't like about Canada. I don't like the way we treat our Indigenous people. I don't like how we're sometimes America's lapdog when it comes to wars abroad. I don't like how, I don't know. But like, those are basically the two things that really kind of bother me. And, you know, I think that Canada can be a better country, and that if I devoted myself to kind of a love of Canada, it would kind of sacrifice my ability to be able to push it to be a better, even better place.
No, I think that's what most folks want. Most folks are coming at it from a good spot. They actually truly want to help. It's just when you go into a particular job or a situation where you're dealing with a lot of difficult problems are difficult. If they were easy, I mean, when they've been solved a long time ago. And then we end up getting caught up, whether it's in a quote-unquote echo chamber or just a lot of folks that are just kind of playing along to kind of get along, even if they do voice things in more of a private setting. It's just, I think you should be able to speak what you think, more or less wherever you are, perhaps moderate your profanity and everything like that, depending on the group. And as long as you truly believe and you're coming at it from a good place, I don't think many folks have a problem with that. It's just when you're in just such a little bite-sized thing as like a tweet or just even a quick Facebook post or anything, it's like, if folks are trying to, oh, I'm in trouble. But if folks are coming at it really from a good spot, I'm terrified right now. I will finish this thought and then perhaps go to Dragon Mode for a minute. But basically, whatever the heck is going on, as long as you're coming at it from a good spot and you explain where you're coming from. Because one person's view and their life experience, Lapis, is going to be a lot different than mine. It's going to be different than CSG's and everything. And to take all of a person's life into account in 280 characters, that's, I don't know, maybe it is enough. I don't know.
No, it's definitely not enough. It's definitely not enough. I mean, I have conversations with quite a lot of communists and socialists. Now, I, for instance, myself disagree wholeheartedly with the premise and the ideas, but that doesn't mean that I want them to be quiet about it. But at the same time, I want to hear their ideas because I want to know if there is something that can be used to be able to better society. If you close yourself off from the ideas, you're not going to make society better just because you disagree with the ideology.
Well, for instance, I have had discussions with conservatives, anarcho-capitalists. I've had discussions with centrists, liberals. I've had discussions with interventionists. I've had discussions with tons and tons and tons of different people who I disagree with, you know, social democrats, even people who are more to my left, like, you know, anarcho-communists or whatnot. I do try to hear all sorts of different sides of the argument and to interact with them. The one side I really can't is fascism. I really, really have, there's just something that like, no, can't talk to you. You want to kill me and you want to kill all my friends. So there's not really something like when you want to find common ground with something, it has to be kind of a two-way street. Someone else has to be willing to walk and meet you in the middle of the aisle. They can't just expect you to walk across the thing. And that's always what I feel like I'm doing. You know, when I used to talk with fascists, and I would see what they were doing, and I would see the dishonest ways they would argue, and I would also kind of see, you know, how, you know, what, like, I felt really arrogant and scummy when I was arguing with fascists too, because it felt like a bit disgusting to me that, you know, the idea that we should kick all the immigrants out of, you know, the West should ever be something that is talked about, should ever be something that is, you know, up for debate. Like, that seems to me so abhorrent. Like, want to remove millions and millions of people from their livelihoods and homes just because you feel a bit insecure about, you know, having different people around you.
I've got a quick question from the voice of one that's in the chat. He quickly says, define fascism or fascists as you see them.
Far-right authoritarians who have a support or an interest in ethno-nationalism.
That seems similar to a dictionary definition, I believe.
It is actually the only thing.
I know some people, you know, overuse the term fascism, and so I can kind of understand why he's asking. But no,
that's fine.
You know, I'm not talking about pretty much every run-of-the-mill politician, including everyone who supports Donald. I'm talking about specifically, you know, this extremist sect that wants to, you know, that basically wants a genocide.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that you would need to add to your definition is the idea that the state is also in complete and utter control. That would be the only thing that you need to add to your dictionary definition. That's all. Yeah. I mean, you don't really need to add it. It's just a case of that is the dictionary definition. I don't even know why I'm saying that. I'm literally adding something that actually has no relevance to the fucking conversation whatsoever.
Wait, what?
It's fine. You know, sometimes when we try to find common sense, we often, you know, encounter barriers.
Yeah. No, that's fine. It's just me being a little bit stupid. Most people that know me know that I normally try to be as correct as possible, and sometimes it gets me into fucking trouble. It's just a case of just leave it. Just leave it. It's not important. It doesn't matter.
That's why I'm in trouble with Mrs. Memes.
Oh, what did you do?
I did and do several things. Let's just say on a week-long Disney vacation, I loved this girl to death. She is an amazing, intelligent woman. Day 2, we fought over how to wash lettuce. Day 3, I contributed to her getting hit by a 20-foot tidal wave at Typhoon Lagoon at Disney.
That's fair enough. I think we've all been there.
We've all wanted our partners to be hit by a 20-foot wave.
No, that's what she said I wanted, but I borrowed her goggles because she was feeling a bit nauseous. We were going to go down the lazy river after. So I'm like, she's like, 2 minutes. I'm like, 5. She's like, 2 minutes. And then she turned around. I'm trying to negotiate like 4. So about 2 minutes in, I go down to the deep end and everything. And as I resurface, all of a sudden I'm like, oh, there's no more waves in the wave pool. I'm like, the big one must be coming. So I go out by the barrier over there and I'm like, all right, all of a sudden they're making the announcement, but they have us move. We're too close. So that delayed it several minutes. So we move back, and then all of a sudden I hear Memes, and I'm like, wait, what? Memes? I look over. I see Mrs. Memes. So I start swimming back to her and everything. And about this time, I hear everyone going, whoa. I look back, I'm like, oh, there's a 20-foot tidal wave coming. At that moment, I realized I am in a lot of trouble for a lot of reasons at this point. So the wave's coming, I catch it a little.
Her fault.
No, it comes, I swim, it goes over me, and then she gets hit in the face because she wears contact lenses. So if the chlorine gets in there, it burns, it hurts, and everything.
Yeah,
so she'll be in pain. So at that point, when I resurfaced after the wave, I looked, and I saw a look of death at me. And at that point, I realized I was in so much trouble for so many different reasons. And I'm like, as I'm swimming, I realize she's in pain, so I feel terrible. But at the same time, I realize it's something like out of like Friends or Seinfeld or something, just that worst possible moment to be there. And I may have been trying to get some of the humor out while I was underneath there, slightly giggling a little bit about the objective situation, realizing I'm in so much trouble. This is going to it ended up costing me a lot of pina coladas with the raspberry swirl insert, along with a whiskey floater. But I mean, we started to make progress, and then I ruined it. CSG, this isn't a family stream, but come on. I'm sorry, I completely sidetracked us there. I'm sorry. I'm using everybody as my own counselors and therapists. I apologize.
Well, to be fair, I'm actually I'm almost qualified. I just got to wait for my fucking certificate at the end of September. But I'm almost qualified as a counselor.
I know MC, and MC's poking fun because I asked him advice for like another like half hour after our little discussion after he was yelling at Wizard of Cause for some reason or another.
Oh, that was funny. I actually watched that video all the way through. My missus actually walked in on that video and went, you know, he says a lot of stuff, but if he was a bit quieter and he didn't shout, I bet more people would listen. Because I've actually got a headache. This is my missus, and she's used to me talking. She was just come in and just went, why does he have to shout so much? She's like, because he's angry. Like, yeah, he doesn't have to shout that loud.
To be fair to MC, when he first started that string, he started out with calmly. He's like, hi, this is MC. He's like, I decided to go about this, and he said he was going to do a rant. And that's what he provided was a rant, and it probably would have been a 15, 20-minute rant, except that I popped in and started going back and forth a little bit and asking him a few questions, and he was asking me some questions, and it turned into an hour and 48-minute stream. But these things happen.
Yeah, I watched, I think I watched over an hour of it, and then Mrs. kept on saying, I've got an headache, turn it off. To be fair, it was around about 12 o'clock at night when I was watching it.
Headphones, man. Headphones. MC can be very loud. He reminds me of my ex-football coach had a big like vein, and every time he would yell, I was always afraid it was going to pop and explode and hit us.
But then my missus would say I'm not sharing. Then my missus would say I'm not sharing with her.
Oh no! I think your relationships are so cute. I think it's so interesting that I'm talking to people who are so much older than me. I'm barely 18.
You are a wise gal, Lapis. I'll give you that. You're wise beyond your years, retrospect, for many folks, or at least compared to us.
Definitely compared to me. definitely compared to me. Not, should we say, act my age at all.
Well, we're both weebs, so it's all right. We accept it.
I'm not a weeb. I'm not a weeb.
You're a weeb. You're a closet weeb. We already discussed this. I mean,
yes, I'm a closet weeb, but I'm not a weeb.
My consumption of anime is mostly limited to Studio Ghibli movies and Full Metal Alchemist.
I've heard good things about Full Metal Alchemist. And actually, Mrs. Memes, I think she actually said something nice about it, so I should probably try to share that with her. I've heard good things.
Yeah, Full Metal Alchemist is actually really decent. It's got quite a long history. It's also got two different sagas. So it's got something like a Dragon Ball saga, and it's also got a Dragon Ball Z section as well that goes into more fighting and more stuff. It's actually a really good anime. Though I don't know anything about anime. Fuck you all.
Yeah. We both walked the path of Naruto.
I'm not part of it if I had been expelled.
You've been expelled. Well, hey, I'm going to welcome you back.
God damn it. Fuck you, Naruto. Let Sasuke die.
Hey, no. There is only Shinobi.
We need a fifth world war.
All right. So speak. Oh God. All right. MC is a we. Oh, okay. But so, anyways, back to healthcare. I think a couple of things that we've touched upon that we actually do have a certain level of agreement are, as far as basically like actually getting the healthcare to the folks that need it. I've heard us both, basically all the folks here agree, basically having some form of digital connection to your healthcare in a way that would be run well, that would be efficient, that would help make things easier rather than having to be on the phone for just maybe hours on end to try to book an appointment or trying to
Why not implement both sections? Why not implement both? As in the idea of putting a data section or a digital section down for people that are a little bit more savvy, that can actually deal with what's going on the internet and on the computer and so on and so forth. But also keeping the same amount of people that are on the phones. So that way, when somebody does actually phone up, that instead of being, I don't know, 50th in the queue, they're only 5, they're only 5th. So they can actually stay on and actually get what they want and actually have somebody who knows what they're doing help them. But then you also have
pre-scheduled. Well, taking something from the private industry, I mean, I used to work in the broadband industry for like some like the different like cable entities and stuff like that. And a lot of things that folks hated about like the cable industry was that you just have notoriously long wait times. There are some companies, what they've done is go online, schedule a time, and then we'll give you a call. So it's a lot easier for folks to maybe go about their day, being able to take care of things at the home, maybe be able to commute and do some errands, and then pick up a call rather than waiting online. Because even from somebody that worked on the back end of that, I remember different sales promotions where even some of our back ends at times, you'd be in like a 45-minute queue to put in a sale, to do your job. I went to like a Halloween party at my friend's house, played 3 rounds of pool, and then 3 rounds of Beirut. We won 3 games. And then I was up in the queue to put in a sale, and we were so busy at the time, I had to call back again and then put in my other individual sale. I mean, it ended up working out because I put on speakerphone in the background. But still, I mean, if stuff like that's happening in the back end, those things eventually got hammered out. They found better ways to input data, leveraging technology. And if we could do something like that on a consumer side, basically taking maybe some of these private things or private industry developments and applying them in a way, again, that works well, maybe we could test that on smaller scale. That's why, like, when I went to that whole like freedom of speech thing, I'm like, we have the greatest social experiment in the world, and these are the United States of America. I think that's true because we have so many different states. Why not try several things in different states, see what works on a level, and then have the government framework go around that, rather than just having one big wheel that needs to constantly spin? Well, maybe we need something, a whole bunch of smaller wheels, kind of like on a tank, because tanks are kind of fun. They're armored, and I wanted to be a tank commander back in the day before I became cowardly. But
do you sexually identify as a tank?
That's ridiculous. I identify as a dragon. Come on, CSG. How long have you known me?
No, I've known you for a while.
In your profile pic.
Well, exactly. No, I'm just kind of going along the lines of basically if you're going to have the federal government do something, rather than just having to be one hard, immovable object, have something that's adaptive that maybe supplies some form of assistance to all the individual little wheels via a tread that could basically adapt to the terrain. Yeah, it's not going to be the most efficient thing, maybe not going at 200 miles per hour, but you know what? You can deal with a lot of hard terrain. That's for UMC.
No, I actually do agree with you in most parts. The only thing that I disagree with you is in the fact of them giving you a phone back. So, for instance, that you don't not forgetting as in you've got something to do, but you go out and you do shopping and you get a phone call while you're in the middle of shopping. You cannot give your health details in the middle of a shopping cart or in the middle of a shopping area or in the middle of a pub or in the middle of driving, in, for instance. You can't really do that.
That's true. Oh, no. I was giving that more of an example, saying rather than calling and being on the phone, if you know you're going to be back at 7 o'clock at night, or you're going to have a lunch break, and between like noon and like noon 15, if there's an allotted window where you might have some time and have some additional time. So if you're eating lunch basically like in your office or out somewhere else, or you're in your, basically you could kind of customize it rather than like, yeah, you're not going to have them call when you're in the middle of the market. That just seems a little bit silly, or you're riding on a bus. But there are a certain number of times where and if it doesn't happen to work out, you could queue it up for something else. It's something that I think would take away a lot of the stress of having to sit on the phone for maybe like an hour or so. It's kind of like doing the whole Grubhub.com thing where it's like late night. A lot of folks, I don't want to call, you call. I don't want to order. So you go on to like either Domino's.com or you order through Grubhub, and you will pay a little bit of a premium for that as well. Should you necessarily have to do that for your healthcare? I don't really think so. But I mean, it's something that I don't think it would require a huge amount of effort that would make things more accessible to people.
Both Mad Dodge and MC have put quite an interesting question. Now, obviously, I'm going to paraphrase. They suggest that would it be a good idea for the federal government to completely and utterly stay out of public healthcare or healthcare in general, and completely and utterly leave it to a state level?
Well, I mean, in Canada, it's funded publicly, but you know, our healthcare system is publicly funded, but the actual decisions of how those resources are allocated is left up to the individual provinces and territories. It's a somewhat appealing idea, but the problem it means is that those red states will probably end up giving their citizens awful health care.
But then they wouldn't vote them back in again. So then it comes back to the power of voting.
But no, they always do. They always vote Republican. Like in Utah, no matter how bad a job they do, they always vote Republican.
Well, that's fine. Then unfortunately for them, they will eventually realize that if they stop voting for Republicans, then their healthcare is going to get better. Eventually people learn. I don't
know. Like, I don't know what it is about like Utah or West Virginia. They're just so Republican, and they just.
See, I absolutely love West Virginia.
Well, I mean, I've never been to West Virginia, but
we have a friend from West Virginia.
Oh, are you?
Oh no, I didn't even know that. I didn't even know any of that. I wasn't even going to go down that road.
I was literally going to sing the song.
What song?
West Virginia.
That's a song.
Yes.
Oh, Lynn's gonna kill me.
Oh,
I'm not gonna sing it anymore.
West Virginia. It's a pretty famous country song. But anyway,
yes. In fact, Vince, you should actually know it. It's on the. It's
okay.
Go on.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose like there's some. It's somewhat appealing idea, I suppose, leaving everything up to the states. However, I don't know. Like, honestly, I think half the problem with the Canadian healthcare system is that it is a bit too decentralized. And because we leave it up to the provinces, there's so many inefficiencies that could be better solved if we just coordinated it centrally. But the problem is then you give up the local control. And so, you know, you kind of have to, you have to kind of weigh the costs and benefits of that.
It's kind of like the balance of the bureaucracy, because I think what I heard from both the Canadian as well as the UK-based healthcare systems is there is a lot of bureaucracy, and there's a lot of money that's spent on things in areas that could be better spent, like actually going as direct care to the folks.
Yeah, well, there's definitely improvements in resource allocation, which could be made in Canada, certainly. Half the time, I think those changes aren't made because the politicians that are elected are somewhat self-serving, and it does not benefit them to remove jobs
Is it me that's disappeared?
Okay, no, I just want to make sure. Okay, I think Lapis had a little slight hiccup there. Looks like she's still with us with a hiccup in the internet. But, well, yeah, and one of the things that we tend to see, just kind of commenting until she gets back, is basically if you have folks that are in positions, to ask folks to not act in their self-interest. Because if you're going to ask folks to say, well, you need to cut your budget, you're going to have to lay off a bunch of folks, it's like, those folks that hold those jobs are not going to want to give up on those jobs, and they're going to do what they can to like basically fight against that. Because, I mean, if you're going to take away somebody's livelihood, I don't care who that is. I mean, human nature, they're going to fight back against that. So it's just like, how do we find a way to help improve? Like, is there an off-ramp, if you would? Like, if the system is truly not functioning well, is there an option to kind of do like some places would do the early retirement, and rather than replacing that individual, basically giving them something, or saying after so many years, once these folks are either qualified or these many years, basically not completely screwing them over and giving them a way to help, like at least plan for their future out, and saying, well, you folks don't have jobs anymore, so just make the best deal. Because otherwise, like when it comes down to just cutting a department, it's like, yeah, you should expect folks to lobby against that, because I mean, that's their livelihood. So like to factor all these things together at once, that's complicated. That's a lot of math, guys. The math is hard.
It can be, but I think where Lapis is...
Oh, go ahead.
No, it's fine. You go. It's fine. It's not a problem. You go. Yeah, go on.
Like, I'm for providing a lot of amnesty for prisons and cutting back on, you know, unnecessary detainment on border security. I'm for legal, and I'm also for cutting, you know, the surveillance apparatus that's slowly been gaining ever more power in England, especially, also in the United States and in Canada as well. And I'm for decreasing those powers. A role is ensuring the greatest possible livelihood of its citizens, of improving, providing the things they need to have the basics of life, like healthcare, like a home, like food, like clean water, you know, like energy. I think the state has an extremely important role to provide quality services in that regard.
Yeah, nobody's entitled to any of that. I'll start off with the border thing. The thing is, if you have open borders, regardless of what type of immigrants are coming in, I'll leave that for another day. But if you have mass numbers coming in because they want to use, for instance, benefits, or in this case, the health system, how do you then sort out the differences in waiting times for people that are then overusing the system? Because from our own experience in the NHS, for instance, we used to have people that would come over for an NHS holiday, which was a case of coming over and using our hospitals to be able to have babies. They'd call it a baby holiday, and things like that. That was in the 80s and in the 90s. We now have massive amount of people that are using the NHS, obviously, all the time. Now, I don't have a problem with people using the NHS. That's not what my issue is. But if you have massive amount of people that are doing it, that means the indigenous population cannot use it. And at the end of the day, and I mean this in a very nice way, if the nation that has built that system and the people that are in that nation cannot use it, what's the point in having the system? Because all you're doing is helping people that are not even in the country legally.
Well, I think we're looking for like a greater benefit. I think it comes to, sorry to cut you off, Lapis, but I think one of the big arguments where we kind of get lost on here is whether somebody's entitled to something. I mean, we could go down the road of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I mean, one could interpret a lot from there, which, I mean, I think we could save for another stream. But I think it comes down to, if somebody falls upon hard times, like if somebody is literally going to be dying in the street, making sure that's not happening. And if somebody does have the means to
but I agree with all that.
To provide at least a base starting point for folks.
But I agree with all that.
Okay.
But I agree with all that. What I'm saying is, if you have, say, 6 billion people in your country, as an estimate, as a guess, or I can do maths because maths is hard. So you have 6 million people in your country, and you have enough hospitals just about to cater for those 6 million people. And then you have the equivalent of another 2 million people coming in. That means that a lot of people are not going to be able to use those hospitals. And that goes for the immigrants that are coming in, or from people that are coming in as refugees, or whatever word you want to use for those types of people. And it also means that people that are indigenous to the country cannot use it, because there is only so much resources and so much time that the people can actually give, which means... Yeah, go on, Karen.
So that's kind of assuming that the immigrants that are coming in would not, add work and then add tax to the nation, which could be used or would even improve the system. Like in countries that have an extremely low birth rate, like Germany or Sweden, immigrants can actually be a huge growth in the economy. Like Sweden's economy for a while there was really taking off. Like it had, in Western Europe, the growth rate that's kind of typical is like 1-2% maybe, if that. Sweden was getting like 3.5 to even 4% in terms of its growth rate, mostly due to all the new houses that were being constructed because of all the people that were coming in. Immigrants can be a huge engine of growth for the economy, and that growth can be used to help expand welfare programs and expand benefits for the indigenous population, as opposed to just weakening them.
Agreed, but I'm not suggesting that they are immigrants that are coming across to work. I'm talking about mass immigration, as if you have a population of 6 million and then you have a third of that population then increasing. You cannot form infrastructure quick enough to be able to counter that, which means people will get lost in the actual building of it, regardless of if every one of those 2 million people got a job.
Well, actually,
I'm not sure.
Oh, go on. Clarify.
Yeah, okay, fine.
I'm not
a problem. Go on.
Sorry, this stream is kind of funny because it's bouncing all over the place. First, we started talking off about healthcare. Then it became about the EU. Then I think it moved on to
it went to a relationship
immigration, which is, I'm fine with that. But honestly, common sense. It seems like we have a lot of ground to cover on this topic, and I actually have to leave this stream very soon. Actually, almost right now, since my computer is dying and it needs to be plugged in. So, how about this? Would you care to come talk to me on a private hangout on my channel and discuss the topic of immigration? And,
sure.
How much security is necessary, how much guards around undocumented immigration is necessary, and what policies a country should adopt.
Sure.
All right. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to both of you. Thanks for having me on, and we're signing out. Ta-ta for now.
Thank you. That was Lapis there. Her channel link is in the description below. So I think it's probably a good time to kind of wrap up the stream. CSG, if you want to give some of your final thoughts on some of the stuff we have here. Of course, we do have plenty of disagreements, but hey, these things aren't easy. They're hard. So got to start somewhere.
Yeah, no, I actually didn't really have any sort of disagreements. The thing is that I was trying to point out, just one final word, was yes, immigration is absolutely fine, and immigration does help economies and does help places and everything else like that. That's why I'm a civic nationalist, because I believe that people that come in to adopt the ideas and culture of the nation are absolutely fine. It's the same as if I went to the Middle East, I'd have to adopt their culture. That's the way that immigration is supposed to work. That's the reason why you move across to that country, because you think that it's better for you and a better life for you. The thing that I was trying to suggest was that if you have mass immigration, the numbers in the state cannot keep up with the rate of people. That was literally all I was trying to mean. But I suppose it's a case of disagreements happen. Disagreements can always happen, especially when it's something that is as a hot topic as what immigration is. Now, I'm not sure where to go with that. I mean, I like the idea of having a two-tier system, as I said before, a private and a capitalist system. I think those ideas are the best ways of moving forward, implement the best of both worlds. Then that way the government can subsidize the public sector and capitalists can subsidize the private sector. It works both ways. It helps both people. And it keeps things going, and it can have competition between itself. Competition in itself is the highest form of innovation. So if you have the public sector is going to want to keep up with the private sector, and for the private sector to work, you're going to have it be better than what the public sector is. So every time one gets better, the other one has to get better. So the innovation in itself will create a supreme market that would just make things so much better for everybody in general. That's my idea. That's my principle of it. I think that we should implement more, believe it or not, Scandinavian ideas of implementing both socialistic programs, not nations or socialist programs, but social programs, and implementing the idea of capitalist systems. Because I think, and I honestly do feel this, that both systems are there and created to be able to help each other, rather than one picking one and one picking the other. Both systems have their flaws, and I think that if you merge both of them together, it kind of goes like a fusion from Dragon Ball Z, for instance. Both have their flaws, but you put them together as competitors, and they seem to make each other work.
I got you there. CSG, and I just gave MC a hashtag nod. Also, we better run out of here very quickly before he goes off. It's all right, MC. I love you, man. I love you. No, that's a topic for a different night. But well, yeah, CSG, kind of like going on what you said over there. What was actually the last thing you said? Because I did have a comment, and then I forgot that I had the oven on and stuff.
I basically said that the idea of putting the socialist programs, or social programs, should I say, sorry for my correction, social programs and capitalist programs causes a fusion to help both of them, because both of them have flaws.
Because there's no case study over like one company that started to take on different aspects of, let's say, like a delivery service that may have been state run, and then having private competition come around to help make each of them a little bit better in some ways. Like, that doesn't happen at all. But I mean, I should have bought Amazon stock a long time ago. God. But well, I mean, to kind of end on that, it's like, yeah, no, I tend to agree. It's like, I think we can do better, and I think I'll give a Professor Peterson analogy, as much as I like to do that here. I think there's something with modern technology between social media and the blockchain, just some coming together, those two, to hold accountability as well as self-verification on multi-levels that could probably help move this forward. So I do think we can use the internet to help solve a lot of these problems, because, I mean, if people do ruin everything, I mean, yeah, but I do believe at the same time, most folks are good people. As long as folks are being genuine and they think they're coming at it from a good place, as long as folks are honest about it, and we can hold some level of accountability, which I basically hear is one of like the ulterior perspective there, saying, yeah, we need to help prevent waste. I agree on that. I think most of these folks aren't saying that we shouldn't help prevent waste, fraud, and abuse, because then you're dedicating resources to areas that could be better spent on folks that really need it. And I think that's something that most folks tend to agree on. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm just some dude that identifies as a dragon on the internet. But with that being said, hey, thank you all for joining us. I'm sure I'm going to get yelled at by many people on many different sides, quote unquote. But you know what? That's part of life. So with that being said, thank you all for joining us, and peace out, everybody. Where the heck's that fun?